Afternoon, good evening. Thank you to CHI Network for this opportunity to discuss partnering and partnerships and how we in the foundation engage our partners. My name is Sildy Calo Gonzalez. I work as a strategy and partnerships lead for the Zulik Family Foundation, or ZFF. ZFF is an independent nonprofit foundation in the Philippines. We are a philanthropic foundation, and we have been in existence as a nonprofit foundation since 2008. I have been working in partnerships in official capacity since I started working for ZFF a little over 10 years. Prior to ZFF, I worked in projects and also in a bilateral agency on grant management. In the foundation, a lot of what we do in project management is also about partnerships. Tonight, I hope to provide some information to boost your knowledge and skills in partnering, and that it will also help your organization firm up its partnership strategies or policies. So for most of us here tonight, we are working in public health, and we understand that our ultimate goal or personal mission, be it our organizational goal, is to contributing to health equity. And a lot of you may have known this by heart, health equity means everyone attains their full potential regardless of their status and identity. And at the same time, a lot of us engage in partnerships to contribute to that health equity. And partnership is a mechanism to attain this goal. So the question for us to answer tonight is, are our partnerships promoting or contributing to health equity? So this is something that I hope a lot of you would take away from after tonight's discussion. So just to take you through some partnership fundamentals. So this partnership framework is taken from the Partnering Initiative and the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Together, they have produced a very helpful guide on partnerships called the UN SDG Guidebook. And we call this a common framework because this is the type of partnership framework that you'll see not only in development sector, but also in business sector and in other types of environments. And the framework identifies four major phases of partnering: the basis of partnering, the types of partnership, the partnership structure, and even how partnerships are managed. Thus, this presentation will talk about why we partner, who we partner with, what our partnerships are about, and how we partner. So first, why do we partner? For this section, I'll talk a little bit about ZFF and why partnership is a main pillar of what we do. First, an introduction about the foundation. Why we partner in the foundation is embedded in our vision. This is to achieve better health outcomes for all Filipinos. This means that in ZFF and in the partnerships that we engage in, we have to make sure that health equity is present in all that we do and no Filipino is left behind in attaining their optimal health. So to do so, because we are working with to achieve all of these outcomes and we are in public health, we partner and work with government. So some of you may know a little bit about the Philippines, and just a bit of a background. Local governments play a huge role in public health in the Philippines as our health systems and programs are devolved. So the national government provides the strategic and policy directions. It is the local government's sovereign mandate to implement health programs according to their context. When we talk of local governments in the Philippines, we talk about provinces, municipalities, which are also, there are cities, and all of these municipalities and cities are also composed of barangays or villages. So provinces also have independent autonomous municipalities and cities. So when we partner with local governments, we do so to promote their capacity. And we train, mentor, and coach local government officials and health staff and design our intervention using what you see in the screen, our health change model, which states that in order to achieve better health outcomes, we have to have responsive health systems. And that these responsive systems are made responsive because they're ably governed by committed leaders. So to achieve our vision of better health outcomes for all Filipinos, ZFF promotes and builds capacities of local governments towards improved governance of public health system. So how do we do it? Partnering is embedded in our 10-year strategy, and partnership is a key objective. We partner to leverage resources as well as diffuse lessons and sustain relationships to achieve primary outcomes, health outcomes, in primary health care, UHC, resilient local health system, nutrition, adolescent, youth, and reproductive health. So the question for us here in this webinar is, why do we partner? What is in our organization or even in our individual vision that speaks of partnership? If you think you can still improve on your partnering goals, you should look no further than your vision, organizational vision, or even your personal mission. So that we have to understand that partnership is a mechanism to attain a goal. So we have to define what these goals are and how partnering can help us achieve that. With this, if we have defined why we partner, we go to who do we partner with. In terms of seeking for partners, when we developed our partnership framework, when I started in ZFF in 2013, we got to listen to a webinar from Stanford University that talks of how you manage your portfolio of partners. And in that webinar, they also talk about why it is important to segment your portfolio of partners to understand their specific roles and their contributions to your strategy. So for this framework, it has shown that we have which we have adapted and also modified. They talk about partners that do not only provide you resources or leverage your resources, but also how partners improve your internal capacities and competencies for you to be able to build on what you do. I will put a link to the recording of this webinar in the references that will be sent out after this talk. So when we identified, segment, and define our partners, we look at first resource partners. So in ZFF, these resource partners are those that provide donations or provide complementary support programs that might not be health related in the areas where we work with. These partners can be corporate or individual donors or coalitions. Then we also have what we call our strategic program partners and learning institutional partners, wherein these are partners to whom we receive grants that we can use to develop, implement, or co-finance public health programs, or for institutions that collaborate with us using their own resources so that they can mainstream our programs. These are either government institutions, bilateral agencies, or other development partners, corporate foundations that can support scale up and mainstreaming. Identifying the types of partners we work with is crucial to identifying why you want to partner with these organizations or groups or even individuals. We have to remember that to be able to reach the why we partner, it has to be defined and it will be defined by the types of partners we engage and why these partners are important or crucial to our organizational strategy. So I'll go back a little bit further as to partnering with government, as this is a very central role or stakeholder in ZFF. Partnering with government is defined by certain laws, policies, and regulatory guidelines in each country. So the Philippines has actually several regulatory policies that allows organizations that are non-government, from civil society, or even from private business sector to partner with government. So you might want to check those types of laws or functions or policies that that your country may have. In the Philippines, partnering with government, particularly with local government, puts our foundation in a different niche as we partner with government intentionally. So we do not partner with local government simply because we have a common goal and we want to provide services to communities, but because we want to build their capacity so that they can provide these services better. So as an organization that works in partnership with government, our partnership with government intends to support, to build their capacity, and not to supplement or substitute their capacity to implement or provide services. So as with any type of partnership and with any type of organization, there is no one-size-fits-all partnership. That is why it's always important to put into context why you are partnering with government. So with that, just a few guidelines to partner with government. First, alignment with government policies is crucial to understand how our programs fit into the general strategic directions of government, as well as their timelines. It is a common mistake, and this happens also in ZFF, that we actually do not put timing to when to partner as a key ingredient to partnering. So, for example, when we talk to government, they have certain timelines as any bureaucratic institution that this is the time when they plan, this is the time when they budget. And often when you partner with them too late or outside that planning and budgeting calendar, um, nothing happens. So we have to remember that as a bureaucratic institution, timing is crucial and we have to be able to work with them, especially when we look at planning and budgeting calendars um, at the right time. Otherwise, it might be too late for us to influence anything. Another guideline is really the terms of engagement. How do we partner with government? So, since partnering with government needs to be official and formalized, understanding the terms of engagement and regulations of how governments enter into partnerships is important. This may mean looking at what are the agreement instruments that you would need to use when partnering with government, particularly if you are looking at funding or grants. Are you eligible to be able to partner with government? So those types of engagement terms have to be defined from the start. Third is compliance and risk mitigation. So it's very important when dealing with government to understand how to mitigate risk, particularly because we are also dealing with a political environment, a very political environment. So as an outsider to government, we have to understand the dynamics of how they work, meaning the government bureaucracy and the political environment. This would enable you to work at different levels of government, not only with the politicians, but at the same time with the technical staff of government, and that you would be able to build and gain their trust. So we have to remember that the government is a critical stakeholder, and they're a critical partner in public health, as the delivery of public health services is a sovereign mandate of government, and also because among all the partners that we may have, the government has the most resources to do so. So now that we have understood our whys and who we partner with, we go through what are our partnership is about. So for ZFF, we have to set some basic ground rules for partnering. And I think this is important for any organization that before you even start to go out and sign agreements with different organizations, you have to put in ethical standards of partnership first. So we are quite conscious in the foundation that since we are a nonprofit foundation and we are also a philanthropy, um, we are also bringing in somebody's name. And since we are partnering government at the same time, we have to uphold certain regulatory standards and requirements. And also because we are receiving grants and donations. At the same time, in line with our vision, we have to ensure that our partnerships align to health equity and are ethical. So we often, aside from understanding who we partner, what our partnership is about, and all this, we have to also define who can we not partner with. So for our foundation, we did define this, which are industries we do not partner with or avoid. And I think this is common to any organization that works with government as well, identifying through due diligence if they have any human rights violation, if they have poor environmental sustainability practices, or engage in business of wars, conflict, exploitation, abuse, or have dealings that may undermine government roles. We also try to mitigate risk in partnering with business sector, particularly organizations and institutions that are in the food and beverage sector, particularly since we are working with nutrition. And as an organization, we are defined also by how we abide to the milk code. So with this, we are promoting to health equity. That's another standard that we have to get. We have to understand. So we have to keep also in mind that if we partner with this organization, are we really promoting rights-based approaches? Are we respectful of any of communities and individuals that will be most impacted by our partnership? And also, we have to keep in mind that if we are defined by who we partner with, then we have to ensure that we have a good reputational and brand value to carry. So Just to test how you understand and promote ethical partnerships, I would like to answer you some questions on partnering. I'll probably ask the help of CHI Secretariat to ensure that everyone is able to answer or participate in answering these questions. So is everybody ready to look at some of these cases? So I hope everyone is. So first question, what would you do? Your organization is approached by a mining company to conduct a study on health behaviors of the indigenous population living in a proposed mining site. First, the mining company intends to identify the package of interventions as part of its community engagement and environmental sustainability program. So this mining company actually wants to do some to ensure some good in their business. However, while they are known for their ESG practices, it has not made any representations with the indigenous leaders of the community. This may be because they wanted you to conduct a study first, or they're just testing out the site. So the question that I would like everyone to answer is, what would you do? A, would you engage with the mining company immediately? Or B, would you review ethical protocols first of how to do research with indigenous communities? Or outright, do you not engage with this mining company? Or do you want to review your ethical guidelines of engaging extractive industries such as mining companies first? So maybe I'll ask Julia to flash the Zoom. So please answer. Uh, this is a multiple choice question. Which of these actions do you think you would want to take um, in engaging this organization? So we'll give you, I think, a minute to put in your responses. Okay. So everybody said that you will review your ethical protocols, and then there are also some that you will also review your ethical guidelines. So I think 57% of the participants have provided their answers. So we're waiting for the rest of the participants. Okay. So just a few seconds before we end the poll, I hope everybody has sent in their answers. We do get some answers in the chat. So okay, end the poll now. So most of you answered that you will review ethical protocols of conducting research and also review our ethical guidelines. So again, our correct answer is actually two answers. It's both B and D. So why do we do this first? One, we have to go back to why we partner. First, there might be different guidelines of how to engage with extractive industries, and it would be dependent on your objectives and vision, as well as if your partner also shares those objective and vision. So it's good that you review your ethical protocols if you would do this or not, but also you would have to review, do we engage with mining, with the mining industry? Do we engage with extractive industries? So you'd often have different answers on this from different organizations that say outright, no, we will not engage. So we will not do any discussions with them at all, even going to the considering if you're going to do this research or not. So it would really depend on what your organization objectives are. So with this, I hope that after this session today, you would be able to do so and review the types of partners that you want to engage in. So just to proceed, I'll go to other things that we should understand. So again, this is an extractive industry, and I think the key trick question here is that it has not made any representation with the indigenous community. Um, we have to understand that maybe they're just after ESG awards or ESG practices, but not really looking at rights-based or equity approaches. So aside from reviewing why you want to partner with certain types of organizations, you also have to look at, is any of these approaches that we're going to do will be contributing to any health equity, to the health equity of this community, or are they going to undertake any rights-based approach? And that's very important, not even during the design phase, but at the very beginning when you define how you want to partner. So I hope that was helpful for everyone. I'd like to proceed to the next section, which is how do we partner? So now that we have some ideas of why, what, and who we partner, we have to look at how do we do our partnering process. So this is also another very usual and common process flow of partnership. It would seem very straightforward, and there are instances when we would go back to this section of managing, maintaining, reviewing, and revising. But in reality, when we implement partnerships, it's a very complex process. Often we go back and forth with just managing and maintaining. Sometimes we are already at the process of completing our engagement, then we would want to renegotiate and look at how we will manage it all over again. And sometimes there's an instance, and I think that happens to a lot of organizations, wherein we just decide not to continue with our partnership and just to terminate or not partner with that organization again. And then even after we exit, we might go back again to reconsider if we're going to work with them or not. So this particular understanding that it's not a linear process, that it can be very iterative, it can be very complex, also allows you to set up what exactly are your partnering processes in your organization. So in the foundation, we do have identified our stakeholders. So we have what we call our primary stakeholders, and this is our local government units. Then we have secondary stakeholders, wherein we look at community volunteers and health workers, also with schools and health organizations. And then to which our program interventions would also contribute to. Then there are other stakeholders that we would also have to understand, identify, as well as look at how we can manage and engage. We also define two types of engaging partners. The first one is really stakeholder management, which is, as it is defined, really the process of managing expectations of different stakeholders, managing their behaviors, managing as well as the actions that will be taken by the different stakeholders with this program intervention. And then we have our stakeholder engagement, which is really the practice of engaging stakeholders. It's very different from stakeholder management, wherein you have to consult everyone, you want to negotiate in appropriate proper manner, and you want to build relationships. So those, you cannot say you manage your stakeholders, but you may often want to do, we engage them. And then when it comes to looking at the process, it is the process that we will be managing, how to get everybody on board. So just to go back a little of what we've learned, again, this is about how we partner. And I've talked a little bit on why we partner and why ethical standards are important. Appropriate code of conduct in partnership is also critical, because the type of partnership and the way you deal with your partner also reflects the type of organization you have and the type of partners that you want to engage with. And also, we have to make sure that when we are in a partnership agreement and we are implementing partnerships, our staff and partners act and abide according to the agreed terms of engagement. And overall, we have to understand that these are shared value. A partnership should be equitable, should promote equality among partners, should be mutually beneficial, and should be transparent. Thus, we have to make sure that it contributes to organizational value and brand reputation. So one important instrument when we do partnerships is to also look at the code of conduct of the partners we work with. So some organizations may have conflict of interest policies. They might have anti-terrorism financing policies. They would also have sexual abuse and exploitation prevention policies and safeguarding policies, as well as probably anti-corruption, anti-fraud, and anti-bribery policies. So those have to be set in place as well because that defines how you will partner. And some organizations may not have that, but if you work or you apply, for example, to certain grant organizations that have very strong advocacies, let's say, on safeguarding or working with young people, then you would be expected to have a safeguarding and prevention of sexual abuse and exploitation policy in place. So also just to go a little bit, I would be asking some more questions for everybody to participate in, just to gauge also if you are practicing good partnership conduct in your organization. So the next question that I would be asking everybody to answer is this. Your team is engaging a well-known resource speaker for a webinar. However, your colleagues mentioned that this resource speaker was rumored to have to have sexual exploitation allegation in the country where this consultant used to work with. So your team wants to engage the resource person because it's a webinar. So this person will not be engaging with training participants in person. And out of curiosity, you went to the internet and Googled his name, and then you see that there were rumors posted in the internet, but there was no documented case wherein somebody went to court and actually sue this person for exploitation and abuse. So the question I'd like to ask everyone is, what would you do? Would you follow your team's advice to proceed since it's just a rumor and it's a webinar? Would you want to continue the training, but monitor if the speaker makes any inappropriate actions during their engagement with you? Would you want to ask the consultant directly about allegations, or would you rather engage another consultant for your webinar? So we have some answers coming in. Okay. Okay. Most of you are answering either B or C. Okay, I'll wait for some of the participants to answer. Okay, I think most of the participants have answered. So I'll end the poll, and most of you answered C, ask the consultant directly about the allegation. Um, the correct answer here is actually to engage another consultant. Um, you do not ask the consultant directly about the allegation, primarily because you are not uh, doing investigation. So you're not in the business of investigation. And um, if you ask them, they might feel of, well, they might say that, why are you asking me questions that I don't want to answer? And it would just probably be, they might feel that this is none of your business. So what is important here is that your organization should have a policy, either a safeguarding policy or a prevention of sexual abuse and exploitation policy, because it would define how you would answer this question. If you have a PISEA policy, it would tell you that you have to uphold zero tolerance for all forms of exploitation and abuse. So even if it's just an allegation, even if it's just a rumor, it's automatic zero tolerance, but you are not in the business to investigate. So this is why if you have safeguarding policies, you would try to mitigate the risk at the onset. So here again, PISEA policy or safeguarding policy is important because it really is mainstreaming awareness of laws that protect women, children, young people, vulnerable communities from exploitation, abuse, including gender-based violence, and online abuse and exploitation. So the question I want you to focus is that your team wants to proceed. So again, it shows that your team might not be aware that if this is a zero tolerance case, you should not proceed at all. You might want to go back and review your organizational values chart if you have any, if you set it, and how this is taught in the organization or espoused by your staff, and its consistency with the reputational value and the brand value that you want to have. You would also want to see how this brand value is reflected in your organizational activity. So having a PISEA policy and upholding zero tolerance for all forms of abuse is one of these policies that you might want to be reflected and taught to all of your staff. So I have another question, and this one is a question on your organization partnering with another research institution to implement a health and livelihood program supporting women empowerment in a conflict-affected area. So there is some um, probably conflict between the government and another organization in this area. So during the field activity, the partner's team leader mentioned that your organization would have to pay revolutionary tax. So this is a form of probably bribe or extortion, depending on how you define it, to a non-state actor. So these are the organization that probably is in conflict with government in this area. So this is to ensure, so paying this revolutionary tax is important to ensure protection of your team when they conduct their field work. So what does your team or anybody in your organization says? First, the team leader said that he can facilitate the negotiation with this non-state actor. So he's also the one who said that you need to pay the revolutionary tax. Second, your team is afraid to proceed due to safety reasons. So among your team, there are already some discussions whether this is a good option to pay extortion money. So the question I'd like to ask everyone is, what would you do? A, would you report the field team leader to your partner organization? B, would you pull out your entire team from the field and stop all activities? C, would you ignore your partner's advice and directly coordinate with a law enforcement agency? Or D, escalate the issue with your organizational lead, review relevant policies, and raise these concerns with your partner organization? Okay. Okay, I'm waiting for a few more of participants to answer, but a lot of you are answering either B or C, and then we have some answers for A and C and D. Okay, I think almost everyone has answered their questions, so five seconds more. Okay. So now we end the poll, and most of you answered B, which is to pull out your entire team from the field, and D, escalate the issue with your organizational lead. So the correct answer is both B and D. And the reason for this is one, crisis management protocols. So you really need to have one. Crisis management would include escalation of incident reports, critical incidents, and it has to be jointly agreed as part of your partnership management structure. So you have to do this when you're negotiating your agreements and finalizing your project implementation plan. So you have to do this before start of any project implementation. So a question here that we want to focus on is when he said this partner said that he can facilitate negotiations with non-state actors. So your staff is correct in saying, the staff who were arguing, that we should have zero tolerance on any form of extortion, bribery, and corruption. So we would have to go back as well and review our organizational mechanisms, including those affecting staff performance and safety, partnership management, and I'd like to add here sound fiscal management and fund transparency. So there are countries like in the Philippines, there is policy on anti-terrorist financing. This is really in terms of looking at fund transparency and which organizations are funneling in money into your organizations. For those that are receiving grants, particularly from other countries, we also have a guideline on the anti-money laundering. And there's a certain threshold that before the grant is provided to your organization, it has to meet certain regulatory and sound requirements, such as sound fiscal policies and fiscal management. So this is to ensure fund transparency and donor transparency across all your partnerships. So just with this one, you really have to understand that paying any form of extortion money just to implement a program is already a risk issue. It should be raised through an incident report and should be resolved jointly with your team and with your partner. And if you think that your partner's values do not align with your own, going back to the partnership process, it may be time for you to terminate or exit from the partnership. It's just not worth the risk getting your team involved, having everybody's safety compromised, as well as possibly your reputation that you're actually giving in to paying extortion money in this type of situation. So, some key takeaways from what we've discussed. When we talk about why do we partner and what our partnership is about, we have to review, is our partnership contributing or promoting health equity? So, this means we have to review the engagement, we have to review how the implementation of any partnership impacts stakeholders, the different stakeholders, whether these are your primary, secondary, or other stakeholders are at all phases of partnership process. So this is really part of your stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement. How you partner, who do we partner with? We really also need to conduct due diligence. So there is know your partner, know your partner policy. So we have to understand, we have to know what is the processes of our partner organization, are their values similar to our own, do they uphold the same policies, for example, zero tolerance on abuse and exploitation. And this has to be done not even at the start of the partnership, but throughout the entire process. You might want to do due diligence every 2 years on your partnership programs or even on your suppliers and your contractors on the ground, just to see if everybody is on the same page and is able to uphold reputation and brand value. So how do we partner? You need to institute clear and transparent processes at all phases of your partnering. This is to ensure compliance to any regulatory requirements. Remember, a partnership is a formal agreement, and also to mitigate risk. So we have to ensure that doing regular due diligence and risk management assessment is an integral component of your project management cycle. So again, why we partner is very critical. What our partnerships are about is also very important. Who we partner with and how we partner are also critical phases that we have to be mindful of when we are entering into partnerships and implementing our programs. So just a few references, we'll share this with you. I think we'll share our slides. Some of these references are quite old, but I find very useful. This particular webinar that I mentioned about, which talks about how to really look at your portfolio of partners. A very helpful reference was also the SDG Partnerships Guidebook was very, very important. It has a very good references to how you go through the different phases of partnership. And in the foundation, we also teach this to our staff just to make sure that everybody also understands our partnership policies and the proper code of conduct when entering into partnership. So that's it for my presentation. I'd be glad to answer some questions from you. And also, I hope that this webinar and the information I shared was very helpful to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Sylvie. And yes, I think a partnership process is iterative and complex, but it's rewarding, especially if it helps us towards our goals now of our whys, which should be clear from the start. So we have a few minutes for questions. So you can send them here on the chat and then I will read them out for Ma'am Siri and the rest of the group. Okay. But I guess to start off, I have a question. So, because ZFF usually partners with governments, and right now we're going towards election season. So, one of the challenges of partnering with government is when the elected officials change, and there's also a change in priorities. So, have you had any similar experience with your partners with these types of cases?
Uh, it's a given. So election is it's a given. There's no way really to get out of it. So you have to design this as part of your intervention early on. So given that we are working with the politicians, and politicians can be very volatile, and at the same time elections is also change in policies. We have to prepare our programs and our partnerships the way we prepare for any disruptions, be it a natural calamity or conflict. We have to plan for transition and exit from the very start. So it's very important also to have ears on the ground, just to look at the temperature of the environment and anticipate what may happen, so that if there is a change in policy to an election, we are able to anticipate already what's going to happen. And we are able to transition and pivot with any policy changes with very minimal disruption or change to our programs. If it requires a major change, then you also have to plan for that change and anticipate for it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yuli. I think Mr. Neil Jasper Corosa has a question. Will you be using your mic? Or maybe not. Okay, let's move on to the next question from Living Lab. What is the best time to discuss PSEA guidelines when engaging in a partnership?
Yeah, it should start when you're first identifying your organization. So um, our experience, for example, working with the with UN agencies, is that you're required to have a PISEA so that you'll be eligible for any partnership with them. So you need to have your policies in place already, your safeguarding or policy. Our experience also with other funders outside of UN, it's already part of their due diligence. So when they shortlist partners, for example, they ask us, do you have any safeguarding or any prevention of sexual abuse and exploitation guidelines. So we're able to respond immediately. So I think at this time, given also policies and regulations in the Philippines, for example, with the passage of the Online Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Against Children law, um, it somehow becomes imperative for organizations to really have a safeguarding and a at least a form of guideline to ensure zero tolerance to abuse. If you're the ones partnering with an organization, you can ask them from the very beginning when you're getting to know them, when you're looking at certain organizational values. You can ask casually, do you have any safeguarding policies or guidelines? And then they'll probably share if they have. If they say that they don't, then you have to go back and see, are we going to partner with this institution? Or do we ask them to build their policy first, or do we put up some mitigation guidelines to make sure that they comply to our policy? So it's also important your policy, your organization has this policy already, and if your partner does not have it, then you can ask them to comply, and you can include that as a portion or as a provision in your partnership agreement.
Thank you, Ma'am Sylvie. Okay, the next question is from Mr. or Miss Atul. What advice would you give for someone starting their organization? And if I may add, no, because for new or smaller organizations, partnerships don't always come to us easily. We have to actively seek them. So where and how should we do that?
Yeah. You have to start when you define your organizational strategy. If you're a small organization, just starting to do to build your vision, your corporate governance, then that's when you have to you have to make sure that it's there. That partnership is just not a secondary thing that you do, that it's really part of what you're going to do because it defines how you're going to collaborate or partner with other organizations. So it's best to write up at least a very simple statement on how you partner, why you partner, and if this is aligned with your organizational vision. Um, if you're starting or you're a small organization, it's also important to also start looking at certain policies or guidelines, regulatory compliance. From our experience in the foundation and in my experience working for a bilateral agency, when we do grant management, that's actually the first thing we look for. Sound fiscal management, because that defines your reputation, how you handle your funds, how you handle your grants, how you handle your resources. So if even if you have a partner who's willing to work with you, but they found out in the middle of implementation that you're not able to manage your funds well, it's usually not a good sign for any partner and they would not want to work with you. So you might want to put in the backbone structures first. Fiscal management is one of the top requirements that any grant or donor would be looking for.
Okay. And I think we'll just have one last question from Mr. Michael Nihut of TDR. So, which aspects do you think are most relevant for the way the CHI network can build their partnership model? So, I think Miss Yubi is more familiar with CHI Philippines. But if you would like to answer this one on the
Yeah.
global aspect or just the CHI Philippines hub.
Yeah, I think it's defining your standards of partnership. That's the first one, because then you can already attract partners who would want to work with you. If from the very beginning you say that this is the type of partners we want to engage and this is the type of partnership we want to have and these are the partnership values that we want all ourselves and our partners to imbibe, then everybody would actually fall in line. There's a very good advice that I read in one of these webinars that I attended previously. They talk about there are a lot of organizations that want to partner with you once you're already well known or once you already have a proof of concept um, that you want to mainstream. What is crucial is to understand if this intent to partner is just noise or if they're actually bringing value to the table when they work with you. Do partnering with them promotes brand value for the network, or it's just like I said, it's just something that they just want to latch on your reputation. So it's very important to segment and identify your partner and understand if this is the partner that we attract, then this is the type of engagement we would be having with them.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Cindy. Segment, identify, and understand. We will take note of that. So I'm sorry that's all the time we have, but if you have more questions, I think Ma'am Cindy put her contact information on the screen. You can contact her. So I will be sharing my screen again to close the program. So again, thank you very much, Ma'am Cindy, and to ZFF for sharing your lessons on partnerships. We are very grateful. We learned a lot and we're eager to apply these good practices that you've shared. And thank you to our audience as well for registering and sharing your time and energy with us. Apologies for the disturbances earlier in the program, but we hope you were able to learn a lot from this session. So again, we have a post-webinar survey that we encourage you to answer, and in return, you can receive a certificate of attendance. And next on our C High Talk lineup, we will be talking about design-a-thons. So with the Hope Network, they will be sharing the innovations that they develop from their designathons that are targeted on ending HIV transmissions in East Asia. So this will be on August 28th, Wednesday, a bit earlier than our regular time. If you would like to know more about CHI, please visit our website or any of our social media pages you see on the screen. So once again, thank you for joining us at CI Talks, and let's keep in touch.